Cross Creek. Good to see you guys. My name's John. I'm the lead pastor here, and it's honestly good to see most of you. Hey, if you're watching online, it's good to not see you, but I hope you're enjoying seeing us, and we are super glad that you are watching. We know it's, if you're checking out a church and whatnot, and especially if church is kind of like a new or an old thing for you that you're kind of like, I don't know about church. Thanks for checking us out. We're safe, but you're even safer there for now. But we'd love to meet you in person. Hey, really quick, we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff tonight, and in that welcome card that Aaron talked about earlier, on the back of that is a little square that says, so what about? And if you're watching online, there's a section on the website that says ask a question under Discover. And those sections are for any question that comes to mind of anything I'm talking about, of maybe, something comes to your mind that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about God or Jesus or Christianity or anything like that. We want to be part of that conversation with you. We don't want to just throw answers at you. We want to kind of help with the conversation. So if you have a question, something you're kind of wondering about, let us join you. So you could fill out that card and then put it in the box at the welcome table, or you could send us an email. So that would be great. I want you to know that if church is new to you, if you're like, you know what, I'll give it one more try, or I'm here because I'm being nice to a friend or a family member, I want you to know we designed this church for you. That's why we're here. We designed Cross Creek to be a church that is irresistible to people who don't normally go to church. Because we want to lead people into a transforming relationship with Jesus Christ. We want to help people find peace. We want to help people find hope. We want people to find confidence. We want people to be able to find courage, lasting courage. Because honestly, there's a lot to be afraid of in this world. There really is. And one thing I know about you, and you're probably like, oh my gosh, he is so arrogant. That's true, but I still know this about you, okay? I know whether you follow Jesus, whether you're not, whether you're checking it out, whatever, whether you're online, I know that you're scared about something. There is something that scares you. I'm not just talking about snakes. I mean, everybody should be afraid of snakes. If you're not, there's something wrong with you. But I'm not just talking about those types of fears, right? We all have different levels of fear, different levels of what we're scared of, and different areas. So I know for some of us, it might be, especially with the midterm elections coming up, the wrong political party getting in power or staying in power, however you see it. Maybe that's one of your fears. Maybe it goes deeper. Maybe there's a fear about losing your job or not able to find a job or a job that doesn't pay enough or you're spending more than you make. Maybe there's fears in your marriage. Maybe there's, I don't know what next year is going to look like for us. I don't know. We're kind of in a rocky place right now. I don't know what's going on. Fear with kids. If you have kids and you say you're not afraid, you're a liar. Right? Because you just start fearing about kids. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Or maybe, and you might not admit this because you don't want to look bad, but maybe you're afraid of looking bad. Right? Maybe you're afraid of failure, of messing up. Maybe there's something you're trying to do that you're not sure is going to work out. And if it doesn't work out, you're going to look like a fool. And you're afraid of that. Or you're just scared of the future, right? Now, hold on. We're going to pause this because I know I'm building it up really good. I want to give you a breath. Listen to what our kids are doing downstairs. Doesn't that sound fun? And if you're a little too old to be there and you're kind of in the back and stuff, it's lame. You don't want to be down there. Don't feel bad about it. But anyway, so we're scared of things. We're scared of the future. Me, my fears, see, I'm going to be that guy. My fears, honestly, my kids. And this is my biggest fear, and I know some of you actually faced this fear and have gotten through it. That doesn't help me much. Okay, and I didn't mean to make a joke, but my biggest fear is my kids or my wife dying. That is my biggest fear. I remember when Liz was pregnant with our first kid, Danny, and I was a youth pastor. I kind of was like, is God moving me to do something else, to maybe, be a different type of pastor, that type of thing. And I've always heard these stories of pastors who have had their kids or their family members die. But then they were able to use that to really minister to people. And so, maybe God puts that in their lives so that they can be really good ministers. And I'm like, I really want to help people, but I don't want to have to go through that. Right? But for some reason, in my mind, I was thinking, well, if God wants me to be in the ministry, he's going to kill my kid. Isn't that ridiculous? We're going to talk more about that too. Getting off to a good start. Okay, so if you're watching online, just scoot up a minute because we're going to backtrack. No. Another fear I have, being really honest, is, and if you've ever started a business or been part of a team that started a business, you might kind of get this, is that this thing not working out. This church thing not working out. Not because, I do love hanging out with you guys, and I would miss that. And I would be like, oh, now I have to go to church in the morning. That sucks. But because we have a team, and it's not just me leading it, but if it falls apart, which it won't, but if it falls apart, how am I going to look, right? Oh, man, he should have just stayed a youth pastor. Oh, he should have stayed. That image thing of how I'm going to look. So why are we so scared? You don't have to admit it. I'll admit it for you. You're scared. Lack of control, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We can't control death. We can't control sickness. We can't control the economy. Unknowns, right? What's gonna happen? I don't know. That's scary. Anytime I have to go anywhere new, I get so palm sweaty because I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know what it's like. There's uncertainty. Maybe we're afraid of our ordinary, which we talked about this 2 weeks ago, our ordinary getting messed up. I might not put it in those words, but we're afraid that our routine, the way we have our life perfectly set up, is going to get messed up, which gets messed up every day. That's why you get frustrated with things. See, fear is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. Fear can take a normal person, a normal seeming person, and twist them into an evil, vengeful thing. Think of Anakin Skywalker. Look what happened to him. Right? Like Yoda said, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. But it's true. I think fear is the root of a lot of different kinds of evil. Right? Let's take the little to the big. Why do people steal things from you? Because they're afraid they don't have enough. Right? They're afraid they don't have everything they want. And so they steal. Jealousy. Oh, I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid they're looking better than me. Racism. Right? Oh, I don't understand them. I don't understand their culture. They're different from me, so I'm afraid of them, and now I need to do something about it. Which leads to war. I'm afraid they're going to take over. I'm afraid that they're going to be stronger than us. It leads to genocide. Fear is the root of all of that. Fear paralyzes. Think of regular life. Fear paralyzes us. It makes us waste opportunities. What if I make the wrong choice? And so you wait, and you wait, until you can't make a choice anymore. What if I mess up and look stupid? Better not to try anything than to fail, right? Where does that leave us? Stuck, paralyzed. I think this is all the result of this fact. Fear obscures reality. Fear obscures reality. When we are fearful, when the fear comes, we can't see life for what it really is. We can't see facts clearly. Our reality is obscured. You stop seeing things for what they are. You start only seeing the danger. You start only seeing enemies everywhere. And it makes you hold on even tighter, which makes you even more fearful that what you're holding on so tightly is going to be gone. It magnifies every problem. Oh, there's no way out of this one. Oh my gosh, now we'll never be able to. It's all their fault. They're going to ruin everything that I've tried to build here. In fact, fear might be the reason you're here right now. Fear might be the reason you're watching online right now. Maybe there's this deep-seated, you don't fully understand it, guilt thing. You're like, I've just felt so guilty, and maybe God won't be mad at me so much if I try the church thing out. Maybe going to church will help get me out of this mess. Maybe someone or something here can help me. This is no way, if you know this is no way to live. It's not life. That's survival. Right? And it's definitely not the type of life Jesus said we could have. So, how do we defy our ordinary tendency to fear? How do we defy our ordinary tendency to fear and then choose to be courageous? Because it's a choice. And so to answer this, I want to take us back 3,000 years. Back in time, 3,000 years, to where fear, I think, ruled everything. Think about 3,000 years ago. No medicine, so any disease could wipe you out. No electricity, so when the sun goes down, all you have to light up your world is fire, which doesn't go very far, so the unknown out there. Think of famine, right? You had no way to store food, keep food safe. Think of just natural phenomena, right? You don't understand. There's no scientific method. Didn't understand what nature was doing. There's an eclipse. The world's over, right? Fear ruled 3,000 years ago. Think about this. You have we're going to be talking about the Middle East, Israel area, where there's these different tribes, warring tribes. And you could be feeding your family lunch, and then you hear off in the distance yells and screams because the people that aren't from your tribe are coming to take your stuff, are coming to take your kids, are coming to take you or to kill you. I mean, they've found so many archaeological treasures just buried in the ground by villages because people were running with everything they had and just buried it and then had to run away because the warring tribes were coming to get them. Raiding parties were coming. In fact, battle was one of the most fearsome things. It's still a fearsome thing. I know we have combat vets here, and I'm not going to try to go into that too much, but imagine you're a farmer back in the Middle East 3,000 years ago, and your chieftain, your king, takes you off to war because the other tribe, the other chieftain is trying to take your land, trying to take your people, trying to enslave your kids. And it's unbelievably brutal hand-to-hand combat. Type of combat where you're not from here to the end of the room. You're not from here to these chairs. You are here to here. Your enemy knows what you had for breakfast because they can smell it on your breath. That is how close you're in this combat. And if you do get injured, it's not a quick death. You could get a cut on your hand, and in a few weeks, it'll fester and be infected and slowly kill you. There's no painkillers. There's no doctors. And if you lose this battle, your family is going to be enslaved or worse. So it's in this world where we find a young man who defied fear, who chose to be courageous. Not because he was a great guy, he was, but not because that's not why he was courageous. It's because he had he had an unordinary, he had an unclouded perspective about life. In fact, what we're going to find out is this. I'm giving you the secret right now to conquering fear. An unclouded perspective produces uncommon courage. An unclouded perspective produces uncommon courage. And so we're going to look at an ancient historical document that we find in the Old Testament of the Bible. It's called 1 Samuel. And we're going to follow the story of, maybe you've heard of this guy, David. Started out as a shepherd, became king of Israel. And we're going to study this really not too well-known story where he faces this guy called Goliath. And we're going to talk about David and Goliath. And so let me kind of fill in the backstory here. So this is our third message in this series, kind of following the life of David, what it means to be courageous. We first found David. He was the youngest of his brothers. He's a shepherd boy. His dad kind of even forgets that he's around when the prophet Samuel comes and says, "Hey, where are all your sons?" And his dad forgets about him. He's the youngest son, but he gets anointed king of Israel. There's already a king, though. There's a problem. The king is Saul. Right? God's rejected Saul as the leader of his people, but Saul is still king. So what does David do? He's anointed king. He knows he's supposed to be king, but Saul's still in power. What we found out last week, he actually ended up serving Saul. He didn't force his someday to come. He waited. He was patient, and he did what he could with what he had where he was. And so what we're going to see is Saul is now on a hill with the army of the Israelites. And on the other hill, there's a valley here, on the other hill is the army of the Philistines. Historical group of people. A lot of scholars think they immigrated for some reason from the Greek area and they started settling in the Middle East. And so when you think through your history and think of like the Spanish conquistadors, right? Coming to South America. And they came and they conquered and they settled different areas. That's what the Philistines are trying to do. And they're trying to kind of squeeze the Israelites and control them. So they're on two hills. They're facing each other. But neither group is really wanting to fight because most of them are just farmers. They don't want to fight each other. And so they're waiting. They're looking at each other. They're kind of feeling each other out. And this is where we enter Goliath. Right? The math of what they say is he was, in the Bible, the account kind of gives him, calls him a giant. He's 9 feet, 9 inches. That's his height. That's huge. If you don't believe that he was 9 feet, 9 inches, that's okay. I don't care. That has nothing to do with, maybe he was 6 foot 9 inches. It doesn't matter to this story, okay? So don't let that part throw you. But it goes into detail about how big he is, how strong he is. His armor weighed 125 pounds. He had this huge spear and this huge javelin. And he was not, Goliath, here's the deal with Goliath. Here's why he's so scary, whether he's big or not. He was not a farmer. His entire life, he had been trained to be a soldier. Every tribe had their champion, their elite soldier, that he's the guy, right? He's been trained since he was a little boy to kill other people with his hands. That is his job. So enter Goliath, and we're going to start reading about Goliath's challenge here in 1 Samuel 17, starting at verse 8. So Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? Are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." Which is a very common way that the ancient world settled their battles. Right? You got all these farmers that don't really want to die. The king doesn't want his farmers to die. They're not going to have any food. And so they each chose a champion to come settle the battle for him. We see this in the Greek epics, like the Iliad. You have two champions fighting each other. The Vikings actually carried this on. They had two champions that would fight each other while the other kind of farmers didn't fight. And so often this was actually seen as a battle between two opposing gods. Each group of people had their own specific gods, and if their champion won, well, then their god was obviously stronger. And so they kind of had it as a battle between two different gods. And so when Goliath comes out, he's huge. He's trained since he was a boy to be a soldier. He says, "Send somebody down to fight me." What would be your ordinary? I mean, you have as much expertise at fighting, except for you soldiers. You normal people, you have as much expertise as fighting as most of the Israelites had. And this guy comes and says, "Fight me." If you win, we'll be your slaves, but if I win, all of your people are our slaves. Here's the ordinary reaction. Verse 11. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Dismayed and terrified. Have you ever felt dismayed and terrified? When you're laying in bed at night and you remember that bank account, you ever feel dismayed and terrified? When you realize you have that presentation or you have that homework, you ever feel dismayed and terrified? When you think of the issues in your family, whether it's your extended family or your immediate family, you ever feel dismayed and terrified? And here's the thing, Saul, when we first meet Saul earlier in the story, he's the biggest Israelite. He stands ahead above everyone else. It was actually Saul's job as king and the biggest fighter. We see earlier also that he's the only one that has weapons, has a sword. It's his job to accept this challenge from Goliath. But he didn't. Why? Fear. What ifs? What if I lose? Oh, he looks too big. His thinking was clouded by fear. So we are left with this huge, heavy feeling in this story that Israel is in trouble. This is amazing literature, by the way. Whether you think this is a historical fact or not, it's amazing literature. You should read it. So we have this heavy feeling that Israel is in trouble. And I'm not going to read the whole thing of the next few verses. I just want you to see how it transitions. So you have Goliath doing his challenge, right? I'm coming to kill you. Send somebody down. He might stop me, but probably not. You're going to be our slaves. And here's how the story transitions. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse. He was from Bethlehem in Judah. Now David. So you have all these challenges, and it kind of transitions to, now David. How dramatic. You should read this you shouldn't read this for bedtime, because when we get to the end, you don't want to read this to your kids. You'll be like, why do they put this on nursery walls? So basically it says, now David, son of Jesse, and what we see here is that David is actually back with the sheep. He was a shepherd, he was back with the sheep. And what he would do is he'd go back and forth between serving Saul, as we saw last week, and being a shepherd with his father. And so he'd go back and forth, being faithful, doing that. And so what we see is Goliath does his challenge. He does this challenge for 40 days. And the two armies don't move. They don't budge. They're on two separate hills. The Israelites hear Goliath's challenge. Saul hears it, does nothing. It's going on for 40 days. And David's brothers are actually part of the soldiers in the Israelite army. And so Jesse, David's dad, sends him and says, hey, go check on your brothers. I want to see how they're doing. How are things going with your brothers? And so he gets there. He goes to the battle lines. He starts talking to his brothers. And here's what happens next, verse 23. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, that was his name, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And here's one of the coolest four words in the Bible. And David heard it. And if there's a soundtrack, you go, doo, doo, doo. And David heard it. Such a good story. What happens next? Verse 24. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, Goliath, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. I don't know which is better. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised? That was a huge insult to the Israelites. Uncircumcised Philistine. Today it just kind of sounds weird. That he should defy the armies of the living God. See, check this out. The same problem, but two different perspectives. The soldiers. This man, he comes out to defy Israel. Okay, have you seen it? Have you heard this? This huge, terrible thing is going to kill all of us. David calls him, who is this uncircumcised, this dirty, this evil, this uncircumcised Philistine, defying the armies of the living God? David's saying, this numbskull actually thinks he can take on God. Who is this guy? I know God. I know that he's bigger. I know he cares what happens here. See, the exact same problem, the exact same giant, two different perspectives. See, perspective is the difference between ordinary paralyzing fear and mobilizing confident courage. Perspective is the difference. So then David's brothers it's actually pretty funny. David's brothers hear him talking to these other soldiers. And he's the little brother, and they're the big brothers, right? And they know what happened when he got anointed. And so they're like, what are you doing here? Who do you think you are? Why are you talking about this? You just want to fight, don't you? You're an evil guy who just wants to see bloodshed. What's wrong with you? And he's like, can't I even talk? Like, leave me alone. And then he turns around to another guy and is like, hey, so this Goliath thing, what'd the king say? And so the word gets back to Saul that David's talking this way, that there's like one guy who's not shaken in fear. And so here's what happens. Saul sends for David. Verse 32, David and Saul's like, hey, what's up? David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. I'll do it. You won't do it. That's fine. I'll do it. Next verse. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. Saul's saying, you're not good enough. Now, it doesn't say this, but I'm kind of guessing Saul's projecting a little bit of what he's feeling onto David. You can't do it. You're not good enough. Do you see how big he is? Do you see how strong he is? Do you see how skilled he is? You can't do it. And Saul's thinking, I can't do it. All right? See, Goliath is not that farmer. He's not that shepherd. He's a specialized, trained, killing machine. And Saul's perspective is, I'm not big enough. So obviously, David's not big enough. You're just a boy. You're just going to get yourself killed for no reason, and then you're going to get us all enslaved. Here's the difference. David, verse 34. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. It was self-defense, Peter. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. Because why? Not because David's so great, but because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. And David says to Saul, you're right. I am small. You're right. I am a shepherd. I'm not trained. But God is bigger. And God can be trusted. And I've seen it. I've experienced it. For you, think about your past. Maybe you're not a Jesus follower. That's okay. There's these times where you're like, something happened. Oh, somebody was obviously watching out for me. What happened what has God done in your past that proves he's big enough now? Think back. David could think back on the lion and the bear, but what has God done in your past that actually proves he's big enough now for what you're facing now? And so the story goes on. Saul tries to give David his armor and his sword, and David walks around. He's like, this is too big. I can't move in this. And so David takes his staff, and it says his sling. And a lot of times, I think in America, we think the slingshot, right? Little boy, Dennis the Menace slingshot. That's not what it's talking about, which, as a historian, that drives me nuts. So it's this sling, right? It's got this pouch, two leather straps. You swing it around your head, and you let it go. There are actually specialized soldiers in the ancient world that were slingers. Okay, so David was good with the sling. So he takes his staff, his sling, and he goes and gets 5 smooth stones from a little brook. Now we're just gonna read the rest of the story because it's amazing and you'll like it. If your husband isn't here, have him watch it online or just read it to him while you're falling asleep. That sounds romantic. So, meanwhile, so David's getting his stuff. He's getting his stones from the stream. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. See, it's a battle between gods. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." They draw this picture in babies' nurseries, okay? David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you because I'm so awesome, No, I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine." This is the guy who wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He lays me down and still." Same guy. "This very day I'll give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Cocky guy. But not really, because he's not trusting in himself, is he? He has an uncommon perspective, uncommon confidence. And the Philistine moved closer to attack him. And David kind of held back and And David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down. And that's usually where the story ends for most of us. It gets worse or better. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from its sheath. So he's taking Goliath's own sword. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. You don't see that in the nursery. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath, which was Goliath's home, and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Shaaraim road to Gath and Ekron. That's in the Bible. That's crazy. So, Saul and the soldiers, they let fear cloud their perspective. They knew as much as David. They'd heard the stories of Abraham and Moses and Gideon. But their perspective was off. See, they saw the danger. They saw the giant, and they compared it to what they had. They only relied on themselves. They knew they weren't enough. They knew their abilities weren't enough. And they were terrified. And it made them useless. They weren't really willing to risk anything. On the other hand, David had a clear perspective. Like I said, he saw the same danger. He saw the same giant, but he compared it to not what he had, but who he had. He didn't rely on his abilities. He didn't rely on his weapons. He knew if God didn't show up in this, he was dead. There was no plan B. See, he wasn't hold back and then, okay, I'm going to stand back. I've got this long-range weapon sling. I've got 5 tries. I'm going to try this. He runs as close as he can to Goliath. If he misses, Goliath has a javelin. It's going to go straight through him. If God doesn't show up, David is dead. But he didn't say, look how big Goliath is, or look how small I am. He said, look how big my God is. He had a clear perspective. He knew who God was, and he relied on him. He didn't focus on the problem or his own inadequacy. His focus was on God. And because of it, he was able to be courageous, and he changed history. Because of his clear perspective, he was able to do what seemed impossible. So let's turn it back on us. You can answer that, don't answer out loud. Between you and God, between your 2 ears. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? You feel like you have so many responsibilities that are just piling up, and if you drop one, you're going to be letting people down. There's change coming. Change has happened, maybe. Your job, failure, looking stupid. Your finances aren't where they want. Your family's not where you want it. There's divorce either coming or have just happened, or death is coming or just happened. What are you scared of? What are you afraid of? Are any of these things too big for you? Or you just feel like, this is too much for me, I can't do it. It's too big. You're right. You're right. You have no control. And you never will. You aren't big enough. And you know it. That's why you're scared. But God is big enough. So what are you relying on? Who are you relying on? Stop focusing on what you don't have and focus on who you do have. Stop focusing on what you don't have and focus on who you do have. Put all this in the right perspective. Is it, this fear of yours, this thing you're either afraid of happening or this thing you're going through, is it bigger than God? My kids kind of do this thing where, God's bigger than that dog. Yes. Like, oh, that's a really big mountain, but Jesus is bigger. Yes. Good job. I'm doing something right. And so when they're scared of something, this is kind of the process we go through. When they're scared at night, I think I told you this a couple of months ago, so obviously you remember because you remember everything I tell you. But we were watching videos about hurricanes and volcanoes because they're boys and they like to watch that stuff. But, they're 3 and 5, so when they're going to bed, they're like, is it going to be a hurricane? Is there a volcano by us? Like, no, but I'm so scared. So I asked them, who loves you more than anything in the universe? Jesus? But how do they know that? Not just because I say Jesus loves you and we sing the song and stuff, but they, even in their mind, they understand that when somebody dies for you, that means they love you. They know Jesus died on the cross for them. They don't understand the whole implications. They don't understand the whole theology, but they know Jesus loves them because he was willing to die for them. And as we say, and as I stole from another pastor, I'm not going to tell you who, if somebody will die for you, they are for you. Who loves you more than anything in the universe? Jesus. So now, who's the strongest? Who's the biggest thing? Being in the universe? Jesus. So the biggest, most powerful thing in the universe is the thing that loves you more than anything else. Think of that perspective. It's simple, right? That's simple, but it's effective. So when fear comes to cloud your mind, when fear comes to cloud your perspective, to paralyze you, here's a little trick. Ask yourself, is it bigger than God? I know that sounds just simple, but that's the cool thing. It is simple. It's not that complicated. Is it bigger than God? And if you have to ask, the answer is no. So if it's not bigger than God, choose to trust him. Tell him you're scared. He already knows it. And tell him you know he's bigger and you know he loves you. And then let him deal with it. Let him deal with that fear. And trust that he is there in it with you. He is fighting for you. He is comforting you. And it's the same with our spiritual life. See, you aren't big enough to get rid of your evil, your sin, your guilt. You're not big enough to have your good outweigh your bad, because your bad is there no matter how much good you do, it is still there. Nothing good you do now can make up for the bad you did then. It is still there, and you know it, and you feel it. You're not big enough to take that out. You're not good enough. You're not big enough to make God like you and accept you and erase your past and change your relationships. You can't do it. You aren't big enough. But Jesus is. Jesus is. Jesus, who was 100% God and 100% human, is big enough. He loved us so much, like I said earlier, that he came and he said, you can't do anything about this evil, about this sin in your life, but I am God. I am coming, and I will save you. I will take that punishment. That's the whole cross thing. He took the punishment we deserved and then proved that it was accepted, proved that he was God by rising from the dead. That's the whole point of all of this, is that a man said he was God, said, I'm going to die, and in 3 days I'll rise, and he did. He proved he was God. He proved that he conquered sin. He conquered even death. the ultimate fear. Let me ask you this. Is your sin, is your past, is your fear, is your hypocrisy bigger than Jesus? Is it stronger? That thing that you can't forgive yourself for, is it stronger than what Jesus did on the cross? Was he dying on the cross? He said, I'm forgiving the whole world of sin, except that one's too big. Can't do it. Wish I could come back and die again? No. Once and for all, he paid for it all. Oh, that's good. Once and for all, he paid for it all. Is your rebellion stronger than Jesus' love? Is your kids' rebellion stronger than Jesus' love? See, following Jesus isn't about what you have done or what you have not done. It's about who you have. It's about trusting an actual person. Who he is, what he did, and what he can do to transform your life. See, when you have Jesus, you have more than enough to live courageously. When you have Jesus, you have more than enough to live courageously. Let me give you a couple of examples. This isn't because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have these good examples because I'm so, no. I talked about my fears of my family dying. So I think about that. I put it in the right perspective when those fears come. And I ask myself, who is God? Well, he's the one who loves me so much he died for me. He's the one who loves my kids more than I love them. He's the one who cares what happens to them more than I do. How big is God? Well, he controls the universe. So what's the worst that could happen with my kids? Even if they die, and I know some of you have dealt with that. If my kids die, they get there first. They get to him first. Then I'll be there in a little bit. Right? I mean, think about it. I don't know your eschatology and your end time stuff, and I'm not going to go into that right now, but if you're a rapture believer, like, someday Jesus is going to come and take all the Christians and that type of stuff, and, for me, I'm like, if that's true, I don't want to be taken. I want to stay here because there's work to do, right? There's people to be saved, there's people to tell about Jesus, but I definitely want my family to go. I don't want them to have to go through it. I don't want them to have to go through the pain that's going to happen. Well, what's the difference? Right? If my family, or my kids, or my loved ones pass on, and I'm still here, I'm just waiting a little bit. I still got work to do. I'll see them soon, but not yet. Put it in the right perspective. Or my fears of this church thing not taking off, not working, and falling apart. Who is God? God is the one who wants everyone to hear about his love. He doesn't want anyone to go without knowing how much he loves them, how he died for them. And that's what we're trying to do. How big is God? Here's the thing, lives, and put it in perspective, lives have already been changed here because of what we've all been trying to do. People's lives have been changed for eternity. And when in the big scheme of things, my image, my ego doesn't matter. Because even if this falls apart, and you all think, man, he was an idiot, you know who still loves me? Jesus. So I don't care what you think. Because I know I'm good. The one who is perfect love loves me perfectly. The one who is the strongest is holding on to me with all his might. I'm good. Put it in the right perspective. See, because like we said, an unclouded perspective produces uncommon courage. When you can see who you have, who is holding you, what's there to be afraid of? What if with every problem, every temptation, every fear, you stopped and asked, is it bigger than God? Would that change your ordinary view, your ordinary response to a crisis? Your ordinary view of, your ordinary response to those everyday problems that just keep changing your ordinary around? Would that change how you view and how you respond when someone doesn't meet your expectations? When someone betrays you or when they let you down? If you had the right perspective, would that change? See, the right perspective lets you trust him in the big and the small because you realize it's all small compared to him. It might feel big, and he's with you in that big. But in control, everything is small to him. Let me ask you this. What would you be willing to do if you had a clear perspective of who is really with you? What would you finally be willing to do if you had a clear perspective of how strong, how big God is, and how much he loves you? So let me challenge all of us to defy the ordinary. Because when God is big, your fears are small. When God is big, your fears are small. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your unending, all-powerful love. Thank you that you're not a God who just leaves us on our own to figure it out, but you are a God who is in it with us, empowering us, forgiving us. Father, I pray that if someone is here or watching online, and this is the first time they've realized, wow, I get it. God loves me. I don't have to do anything to prove to him that I love him. I don't have to have my good outweigh my bad. I can just accept his love. I pray that you would give them the courage to clearly have that perspective and then just accept you. Accept to follow you. And for all of us, Lord, I pray that as our lives go, as problems happen, as things happen in the car on the way home tonight, that you will remind us when you're big, our fears are small. Is it bigger than you? Thank you that nothing is bigger than you. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, if there is something that you're just like, I want to talk to somebody about something, I want to pray with somebody about something, I just want to kind of debrief from whatever you heard. We're going to have Patrick and Janet. They're going to be over here. And they would love to talk to you. They'd love to pray with you. They're good people. They have background checks. Everything's good. Okay? But hey, next week we're going to continue the story of David and kind of see what happens between him and Saul and what to do when there's conflict. Which, I know none of you have conflict in your life, but I probably need this. So, love to see you next week. Invite a friend, and hope you have a good one. See you later.